The females of placental mammals exhibit cyclic changes in the activities of their ovaries, the accessory ducts, and hormones throughout the reproductive phase. And these cyclic changes which takes place in primates. Who are these primates? It includes monkeys, apes, and humans. And such cyclic changes which is taking place in the primates is called as menstrual cycle. And today in this module we are going to learn about the menstrual cycle which is taking place, or the reproductive cycle taking place in humans. So menstrual cycle is the cyclic event starting from one menstruation till the next menstruation during the reproductive period of a woman's life, starting from puberty and ends at menopause. So the cyclic events which is taking place from one menstruation to the next menstruation is called as the menstrual cycle. And the duration of menstrual cycle is 28 to 29 days. The menstrual cycle has two events. The first event are the changes which is taking place in the ovary, and the second event is the changes which is taking place in the accessory ducts, that is the uterus, the oviduct, and the vagina. So two events, the ovarian cycle and the uterine cycle. There are different phases of the menstrual cycle. They are menstrual phase, the follicular, or it is called as proliferative phase, the ovulatory phase, and the secretory phase. So these are the four phases involved in the menstrual cycle. The first phase is called as the menstrual phase. It starts from its duration is from the first to the fifth day of the menstrual cycle, and it starts with the menstrual flow, or it is called as the bleeding, and it lasts for about 3 to 5 days. So first to fifth day of the reproductive cycle is called as the menstrual phase, and this menstrual phase, it lasts for about 3 to 5 days. It varies from one woman to the next woman. Menstruation occurs when the released ovum does not underwent fertilization. So the menstrual phase occurs when fertilization of the ovum has not occurred. The uterus prepares itself by thickening its inner wall, that is the endometrium, with vascular blood vessels and mucus in order to receive the fertilized egg. And if fertilization does not take place, it results in the breakdown of the uterine lining, that is the endometrial lining, and the uterine blood vessel, and this comes out in the form of blood and mucus through the vagina, and that is a cause for bleeding. And if there is lack of menstruation, it indicates pregnancy, or it can be either due to stress or poor health. So the next phase following the menstrual phase is the follicular phase, or it is called as the proliferative phase. It starts from the fifth day, that soon after the menstrual phase is over, the follicular phase begins, and it is completed within 8 to 12 days. And that's the duration of the follicular phase or the proliferative phase. In this phase, two hormones, that is the gonadotrophins, is released from the pituitary gland. Which are the gonadotrophins? They are the FSH, follicular stimulating hormone, and L stands for the luteinizing hormone. What is the function of the follicular stimulating hormone? It stimulates the development of the primary follicles into the Graafian follicles inside the ovary. So that's a function of the follicular stimulating hormone, just as the name indicates. It stimulates the development of the primary follicles to the Graafian follicles, which we had studied in oogenesis. And once the developing follicles starts to release the estrogen hormone, which is the female sex hormone. Estrogen is released by the mature follicle, that is the Graafian follicle. What is the function of the estrogen which is released by the Graafian follicle under the influence of the FSH? It helps in the proliferation, that's the name, proliferative phase. Proliferation of the ruptured uterine endometrium, which has been broken down during the menstrual phase, and also it helps to regenerate the mucus lining of the oviduct and the vagina. It stimulates the development of secondary sexual characters. It suppresses the secretion of FSH by the pituitary gland once its level is enough. And it also stimulates the secretion of the luteinizing hormone. So these are the functions of the estrogen which is released by the Graafian follicle. The gonadotrophins, luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone, they attain a peak level in the middle of the reproductive cycle or the menstrual cycle. And this peak level is called as the phase called as the ovulation, or it is called as the ovulatory phase. Why? Due to rapid secretion of the LH, and this condition is called as the LH surge. It induces the rupture of the Graafian follicle. We can see the Graafian follicle which has ruptured, and it releases the ovum, and this process is called as ovulation, and it takes place in the mid of the reproductive cycle, that is on the 14th day of the reproductive cycle. In this picture, we can see the ovum or the egg which has been released by the ovary has been received by the fembree of the infundibulum, that is the oviduct, part of the oviduct. After ovulation, what was the fate of the Graafian follicle, the remnants of the Graafian follicle inside the ovary? So this is again continued by the event in the ovary. So after ovulation, the Graafian follicle is transformed into a yellow endocrine mass which is called as the corpus luteum. This is the Graafian follicle which has released the ovum during ovulation, and after this the remnants gets transformed into an endocrine mass whose color is yellow, and this is called as the corpus luteum. The corpus luteum is an endocrine mass, and thus it releases a hormone, and this hormone is called as the progesterone. So the source of the progesterone is the corpus luteum, and source of estrogen is the developing follicles. And this conversion of the Graafian follicle into the corpus luteum takes place during the secretory phase or the luteal phase, corpus luteum, and thus the name luteal phase. And it starts from the 14th day after ovulation and extends until the 28th day. What is the functions of progesterone? It makes the endometrium maximum vascular, thick and soft. Thus, the uterus gets ready for the implantation process. What is this implantation? The process of attachment of the embryo to the uterine wall is called as implantation. Thus, the progesterone helps in the regeneration of the endometrium so that it becomes highly vascularized, thick and soft so that it can attain implantation. And it inhibits the FSH secretion so that FSH is not secreted more, so that it prevents the development of the second ovarian follicle. The development of the second ovarian follicle is arrested for the time being. Okay, so that is a function of progesterone. If fertilization does not occur, what happens? What is the fate of the corpus luteum? It starts to degenerate. We can see the degenerating corpus luteum. And what is the function of progesterone? To retain the lining, the thickening of the endometrium. So no corpus luteum, no progesterone. No progesterone, what happened? The disintegration of the endometrium begins, and it leads to the next menstruation, and the new cycle begins. So the cyclic event starting from one menstruation to the next menstruation is called as the menstrual cycle. It began with the menstrual phase, then the follicular phase, followed by ovulatory phase, and then the secretory or the luteal phase, which is the last phase. Okay, so if fertilization does not occur, the corpus luteum degenerates and the endometrium also degenerates, resulting in menstruation and beginning of the new cycle. So during pregnancy, all the events of the menstrual cycle stop and there is no menstruation. So menarche is the first menstruation during puberty, and stopping of the menstrual cycle at 50, almost 45 to 50 years of age is called as the menopause. In this figure, we can see the levels of the pituitary hormones. Which are the pituitary hormones? The FSH and LH. We can see the levels of the pituitary hormone, which goes high at the mid of the menstrual phase, that is the ovulatory phase, during which the LH surge takes place and ovulation is occurring. Next is the ovarian events, the events which is taking place in the ovary, in which the follicles develop, the primary follicles develop to the Graafian follicle, and after ovulation we can see the transformation of the Graafian follicle into the corpus luteum, and if fertilization does not take place, we can see the disintegrating corpus luteum. And these two lines represents the secretion of the ovarian hormones, that is estrogen and progesterone. When the development of follicles has taken place over here, we can see estrogen is at the higher level, and when the corpus luteum is formed, which is a source of the progesterone, we can see the progesterone is at a higher level. And this represents the changes taking place in the uterine wall, the endometrial lining, that is from the menstrual phase, the follicular phase when the endometrium is regenerating, and during luteal phase, due to the action of progesterone, it is maintained at a maximum level. It gets thickened, it becomes soft, and it becomes highly vascularized. And if fertilization does not take place, the level of progesterone goes down, which disintegrates the endometrium, leading to the next bleeding or menstruation.